Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to a special, not so live edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Chris Pinnock, Head of Information Technology and Chief Baker at the Tezos Foundation. The Tezos Foundation, for those who might not know, is the organization responsible for sustainably deploying resources to support the long-term success of Tezos and promoting the Tezos protocol through grants and various other capital deployment vehicles. Hi, Chris. Where are you right now, and how is the weather?
Oh, hi, Stu. Thanks for having me. It's a bit dark outside, but it's been a bit abysmal today. It's been raining. Autumn's here, and winter's going to be here soon. So, what can I say?
Fair enough. It's that time of year. To get the ball rolling, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your personal journey into the exciting world of Tezos and blockchain technology?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the older folks at the foundation, so I have to be a bit careful and keep it short because we've only got half an hour. But I started off in academia. I did a PhD in pure mathematics. I wanted to work in a university. I wanted to eventually become a lecturer and do research mathematics, but the jobs were scarce, and so was the money, to be quite frank. I've always used computers since I was 8, and I was working with Linux at the time as well. And an opportunity came up to work in a telecoms company as a sysadmin. So I went and took that, and I ended up at that company for 14 years. And they kept promoting me, probably just to get me out of the way. But I ended up at the vice president level running the entire systems and IT team. And that was for the biggest fiber network at the time in Europe. So that got sold. I went to do some IT consultancy for a few years. And eventually, in about 2021, I was talking to someone that I did my PhD with. And he said, well, why don't you come and have a chat with Tezos Foundation about an infrastructure contract we've got? So I did. We spoke for a couple of months, and then, as some of these things do, they just turn into slightly bigger things. And eventually, I get this job description for a permanent, for a permanent role, and it's the infrastructure plus running IT for the foundation, plus doing technical grant reviews, and eventually being on the technical advisory committee. So 2 years have gone by, and I've enjoyed every day.
And now here you are.
Here I am.
For those who might not be overly familiar just yet, can you tell us a little bit about the Tezos Foundation and its role in the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the anomaly in that I'm working just outside London. The Tezos Foundation is a Swiss foundation based in Switzerland, ironically. It was set up to manage the money from the Tezos fundraiser. Its remit is to support the Tezos ecosystem and promote the growth. And we're interested in the longevity of the ecosystem. And we do these things in a number of ways. So one is we give grants out. People write to us with a grant proposal. If we think it's a good thing for the ecosystem, we fund it for our processes. We also invest in businesses. If we think the business is going to be something that gives a sustainable thing to Tezos, we invest. But we do all this in a fully audited way. We have to follow Swiss regulations. That's to make sure that we're not just sitting on a fund and handing money out. We're in a decentralized thing. It's a blockchain, but we have to follow those regulations, and that's why we make sure that we're fully audited every year. There's about, I think, 20 people. I've got a very small IT team. We have a finance team that are processing payments, operations team that are processing the grants and doing grant reviews, and then we have a small legal team for contracts.
Okay. And as a member of that team, as I mentioned, you're the head of information technology, but you're also the chief baker at the Tezos Foundation. And I'm wondering if I could get you to explain, what does the chief baker at the Tezos Foundation do exactly? Like, what does your day to day in that role look like?
Well, it's not making the bread. So, I mean, this day to day, I'm managing the foundation bakers. We have 8 of them. They tend to look after themselves. But this week, I've been working on some of the test networks, keeping some bakers running there so that we have a good test network for our developers. We keep a set of boot nodes running so that new bakers can join the network and they can sync from Genesis. We also maintain some live copies of the blockchain. We've got a live copy in every continent except Antarctica. That's only because there's not a hosting center in Antarctica. If anyone knows of one, please do let me know. So
Maybe
um,
one day.
maybe one day. But there's other things I do. I'm managing the security audits for some of our grants, and the currently exciting project is I'm working on the Etherlink infrastructure. So
Mm.
Tezos Foundation will participate. We will put an operator node into that roll up, and I'm working very closely with the guys at Nomadic and Trilitech, which is great.
Fabulous. And I've heard a rumor that the chief baker at the Tezos Foundation is issued an official hat. Can we please have a look at it?
Yeah, well, you have to work for a couple of weeks before you're allowed to wear it. But yeah, this this is the standard issue hat. You know,
Very nice.
so yeah, it has to be properly fluffed.
It looks fabulous on you. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, the chief baker at the Tezos Foundation, as the chief baker, one of your most important duties is the operation of the Tezos Foundation's bakers, which you said there are 8 of them. What role do those bakers actually play in helping the Tezos ecosystem run?
So I mean, bakers are the Tezos equivalent of miners, and if you go back to day zero when we launched the chain, there were just the foundation bakers. So the original 8 were doing all of the baking, making all of the blocks, and the bakers on the network, they record all the transactions and verify that the other bakers are doing the right thing. As coins were issued over the years, and we started to get exchanges, and we started to get people with their own Tez, more bakers came on board. Roughly, we are 15.5% of the network's stake. I think we have about 10% of the distribution off the top of my head. But that 15.5% of the staked Tez is spread over the 8 bakers. And the reason for that is I can take one of them down for maintenance and not affect the network too much. So for stability reasons. And that's one of the reasons we bake as well. We want to make sure that the network stays stable. By us baking, we drive behavior. We other people bake, and when I upgrade, there are people in the community that wait for me to upgrade, and then they upgrade afterwards. So what I mean, whilst we hold Tez as the foundation, we will continue to bake. But in the future, as our funds reduce, maybe we will bake less, and maybe one day the community will be self-sufficient and bake themselves.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Now, as you are still wearing the hat, I've always been curious. How did that process come to be known as baking?
Yeah, so I wasn't around at the beginning. So I investigated, and there's various urban myths, as there are with all these things. Um, a lot of the code was written in France. It turns out that the French are quite good at making food, and quite good at baking as well. But I think the real reason, joking apart, is uh, people wanted a distinctive term from mining. Baking rhymes with staking. We want a distinctive term because mining's computing intense, and we are not. We're far from it. So we want to call our process something completely different.
Thank you for clearing that up.
With that, I have to take this hat off.
That's fine. That's fine. Uh, Baking, of course, is not something that's limited to the Tezos Foundation exclusively. In fact, many folks operating here in the Tezos ecosystem do it. How many bakers are currently operating in the Tezos ecosystem today?
So today, 401. According to, I think one of the block explorers says 401, the other says 400. So 401.
Give or take.
Give or take, yeah. We do get some bakers that come in. They've got a small amount of Tez. They bake for a little while, and then they decide that they don't want to bake, and they do something else. People come and go, as with any project. But as of today, yeah, 401.
Okay. And what kind of equipment does a person or entity need to have in order to become a Tezos baker?
Well, Tezos has got a low barrier to entry, so if you really want to bake with a Raspberry Pi, you can. You make sure you get one with 8 gig of RAM. Make sure you install the 64-bit operating system, and then all you really need is a fast SSD disk. It's better if you put your baking key on one of these, a ledger, to protect it and keep it offline. But you can get started with about 200 to 250 pounds of a Raspberry Pi. Failing that, an off-the-shelf PC for under £500 will get you going. You just need to get Linux on it and get the software on it, and away you go.
Okay. And once that equipment is up and running, what does the baker themselves actually need to do in order to facilitate the baking process? Like, are there manual tasks that they need to complete, or is it largely a passive process?
For me, it's largely a passive process. I mean, I have a PC under my desk, and I do very little with it. This is for my personal baking. For the foundation baking, I keep more of an eye on them, because if they were to drop out, there'd be more consequences. But for a personal baker, my PC is under my desk. It sits there running. When there is a new version of Octez, the software, I need to upgrade it. And I need to do that in advance of any protocol switch, so that I keep up with the network and I keep baking. But really, the only manual thing is voting in the governance elections to decide what new changes happen to Tezos. And I do that in the cycle. I do that, we do the promotion cycle, and then we've got the other two areas where we vote. And that's really the only thing. It does actually look after itself if your PC is healthy.
Okay. And as you mentioned, like the all of this is working towards a day when the chain is self-sustaining and there's enough people baking that it can sort of operate itself. I'm curious, like, how are bakers incentivized to do that, to become involved with Tezos baking? What do they get out of the deal?
Well, I mean, it's much the same as other chains. So when a block is created, the baker mints some Tez coin in that block, and that goes to the baker that baked it. When you endorse, or to use the new word that we use, attest someone else's block, if you're on the schedule to do that, you'll get a reward as well. So your baking wallet will accumulate these awards as you generate blocks and generate endorsements. Also, you get to vote as well. So if you're an active baker, you get to vote in the governance elections, and you get a say in how Tezos is shaped.
Because you're now a vested interest in the chain.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Um, all great stuff so far. I'm excited to learn more. But before we get into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
I'm always ready for the TezTalks lightning round.
Fabulous. It is lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and this is just for fun so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, woof woof.
Pizza or sushi?
Neither, because I'm on a keto diet.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Movies or video games?
Movies.
Is this real life or are we in a simulation?
I think this is probably as real as it gets.
True or false? Money buys happiness.
Absolutely false.
Name one thing you absolutely want to do before you die.
Appear on a TES talk. No, actually, I mean, in all seriousness, I'd like to write a book that is useful to other people in some way.
We've already accomplished the other one, so
Yes,
you can
absolutely.
move on to the next.
Life moves on.
The last place you traveled was?
A couple of weeks ago was Morocco. We landed in Marrakesh. We went to Casablanca. We went to Rabat and Fez, and then back to Marrakesh.
Nice. In 5 words or less, how would your best friend describe you?
Oh, unsuitable for a family show.
And finally, what is your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Well, the weather doesn't normally bother me. I mean, I tend to read books and write things, and I cook and I hack on stuff. So I do that regardless of the weather.
So it doesn't matter if it's raining.
No.
Excellent. Thank you. Those were excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Now that we've talked a bit about the incentives available to bakers entering the Tezos ecosystem to set up and run Tezos bakeries, my understanding there's also a threshold amount of Tez that a person needs to have in order to bake. What is that threshold currently?
Well, currently it's 6,000 Tez. We have reduced it to 6,000. I think it was over 10,000 to begin with. It reduced to 8,000. We've reduced it to 6,000. I mean, that, to someone on the street, that might be a large amount of money, but you can get together with your friends and pool your resources, and you can bake together. So, I mean, I think that is still a low barrier to getting into baking.
Okay. And for folks who might not have the money to pick up 6,000 Tez right off the bat, how can they still participate in that process and earn rewards as Tezos holders?
Well, for most people with small amount of Tez, the best thing they can do is delegate them to a public baker. Um, the public bakers will do this for a fee, and you sign an agreement with them. You delegate your Tez to them, and they bake the Tez, and they give you the reward back to your wallet.
Okay. And for those who might want to stake their Tez with a baker, with a public baker, as you mentioned, can you walk us through what that process looks like? Like, how do they find a baker? How do they go about actually staking their Tez once they've found the one that they want to stake with?
Yeah, so if they go to one of our block explorers like TZStats and they click on the icon that looks a bit like this hat for bakers, they'll get a list of the bakers. If they go to TZKT, they also have a list of the bakers. It's the public bakers that you want to look at. And just looking on my screen here, TZKT, that has a set of parameters. So they actually get feedback about whether a baker is behaving well or not. And they tell you how quickly they pay out. They tell you whether the amounts that you're getting are actually what they say they are. And that's a good place to have a look to see whether the public baker will do what they say. But once you've seen them, you go and you contact them, um, and you negotiate the contract, and away you go.
Okay. And in terms of the information that people can get looking at one of those sites about who those public bakers are and helping them decide who to delegate to, is there other information available, or is it strictly how other people have reported about their behavior?
Well, I mean, you can obviously it's kind of like going to a bank, right? There's 4 or 5 high street banks, say, and you want to make a decision about taking an account with them. So you look at, is the interest rate good? Well, the analog of that is, what's the fee? Um, is this bank well known? You hear all sorts of things about banks at the moment in the UK, so you might not want to go and bank with that bank. You just have to go and make an informed decision. You have to look at their websites. You have to see whether they look professional, and then you can use the information on the block explorers to say, yeah, okay, I'm gonna pick that one. It's just an informed decision like anything else.
Okay. So once you've made that informed decision and you've delegated your Tez, do you retain your Tez, or do
Yeah,
they?
yeah. The Tez remains. So what happens is, in your wallet you delegate your Tez to the baker. The Tez stays with you. It is your Tez, and if you decide that you want to remove the delegation, you can. The Tez never leaves your wallet.
Okay, so you're not surrendering control of it in any way through doing
Absolutely
this.
not. I mean, Tezos Foundation have 8 bakers, and we have a wallet on each of the bakers, but we also delegate from our custodians to those bakers as well, which means that we don't have as much Tez on the baker itself.
Okay. Okay. And as we all know, there is a fair bit of Tez out there that isn't being used for baking. It isn't being used for staking. And I'm curious, from your perspective, do you think that's simply because people who hold it don't realize that it could be sort of put to work earning rewards for them, or is there's some other reason for that?
I think yes, I think you're right. It's an educational issue for a lot of people. they might have invested in Tez somewhere, and they've got the Tez, and they're just holding the Tez. They don't realise. Some of the exchanges will stake the Tez for you, and they'll pay you a reward. And there's one exchange that does that. But I think for Tez that is lying around in personal wallets, I think it is an educational issue. There are some Tez that are not claimed yet from the the original fundraiser. There's on any blockchain there's some coins that are not claimed. But yeah, educational, and I think actually one of the things we might be missing is a sort of Tezos for dummies, or Tezos for our parents. And it's an incredibly good blockchain to learn about coins and stuff on it, because the concepts are quite simple, and the wallets are easy to use, and it's quite cheap to get into as well.
Okay. Um, what was it about Tezos that initially appealed to you personally and made you decide you wanted to come and work in this ecosystem?
Well, originally, the thing that got me on the hook was the fact that it was a large AWS infrastructure contract, and it was using some things like Cloud HSM, which you don't often get a chance to play with. So that was the thing that got me on the hook. But when I did the research, there were a number of things that were obvious, important, and still are important to me. I mean, if you ask me the list in a year, it's probably the same list. But the first one was the governance process. So the fact that every baking participant can vote and decide what the future of the chain is. If you compare that to other chains, where you've got to convince everyone to upgrade the software, and that has all sorts of other problems associated with it. This is a great thing because people get to participate and say. The other thing is the low barrier to entry. So in the first couple of weeks, I found it very easy to install our software and get going and configure it. The price hopefully will go up, but you can get in. The price is there. You can get in quite easily. Just thinking out loud, there are some incredibly clever people. There's a lot of people with PhDs. There are a lot of people without PhDs, and there are a lot of people who haven't even got a degree, but they're all very smart people, and they come from diverse backgrounds, and it is great to work with them. Environmentally friendly was another thing when I was coming to it, because we're proof of stake. The mining is scheduled, so there's no fight about who generates the blocks, and so you don't need as much compute. They were my original list, but I think if you were to ask me, now as well, so to speak, it's the transaction time. The fact that our transactions are settled in about 30 seconds.
Okay.
That's the list.
And you already touched on this, but the next thing I wanted to ask was, like, now that you've been involved with Tezos for a while and you've been in this role for a while, during that time that you've been sort of active and involved in the Tezos ecosystem, how has your view of Tezos and its ecosystem and the community evolved?
Well, it's had a massive amount of change in 2 years. And in my first week, liquidity baking was released, and then in the first year, we had to make some hefty code changes on our infrastructure to support a new consensus algorithm. So we moved from a consensus algorithm of 5 blocks to one of 2 blocks. And we've also reduced the block time again and again and again. So, when I came in, a transaction was probably settling in minutes. Now it's settling in 30 seconds, and we're probably going to go further with that. We've also developed smart roll-ups. We're going to trying to take the load off layer 1, and we're doing that early, and we're going to get that right. And we've got this EVM compatible roll-up coming, which is very exciting. But I think one of the things I observed is when we're sitting at TezDev, despite the fact it feels in some sense a small community, it's how broad it is. And you can be sitting next to the guy who set up object.com and then be having a bottle of wine with one of the wallet developers. And by and large, they're doing good things, and it's very broad, despite the fact we're still in the scheme of things small.
And in your conversations, not necessarily at TezDev, but in the conversations with people in your life and people that you encounter in other areas, when you talk to them about what you do, what's the question you get asked the most often about Tezos and Tezos baking, and how do you answer it?
But the obvious one is, they come up to me quite sheepishly and say, "I want to bake," as if it's some mysterious art. Um, the hard thing is installing the software. Really, what they need is just a little bit of a push and a help to get them over the initial hurdle, and then the configuration is relatively easy. That's typically what it is, and then the conversation usually turns around with, well, how are you going to manage your keys? How much TES have you got? Do you really need to bake? Do you want to delegate? The other question I get asked a lot, typically by people working on my house when they know I'm in blockchain, is should I invest? And I normally tell them the story of about horrific share investment I did years ago. And the answer is the same. You just got to make an informed decision with the information you've got. So they're the two things, really.
Okay. And in your time working in the Tezos ecosystem, what's the thing that surprised you the most about this ecosystem and the community behind it?
Um, so again, TezDev recently, and not just this time, the time before. I mean, there were two competing wallet providers who were sitting having a conversation, and they were working together, and they're trying to make their products better. And I think if you're in a commercial environment working on something like an internet project where you had to cooperate and develop a new protocol, say, you might not get that cooperation. You might have a standards board where everyone goes off and sips champagne and eats smoked salmon for 6 months and then sort of makes a decision about the core thing. But you wouldn't necessarily get that sort of proactive working together. And at the end of the day, we're an open source project that drives collaboration. And ultimately, if we all succeed together, we succeed. The project succeeds.
100%. And
Yeah.
certainly not something, as you said, not something that you see a lot in a commercial environment, and in particular, probably not in the tech space so much.
Quite. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, for those who might be interested in learning more about Tezos Baking and what you do and the Tezos Foundation, what is the best way for people to connect with you and find out more about what you're doing?
Well, I mean, if they want to know about the foundation, there's the website tezos.foundation. If they want to know more about the ecosystem, there's the ecosystem site tezos.com. There's a developer portal there. There's lots of good documents. I've got a few documents on my website, chrispinnock.com, which are completely out of work and provide a different view. If people want to come and find me directly, I'm on the Tezos Dev Slack. I am a very slacker. I do respond eventually. You'll find the picture of me wearing the hat. I'm also on Twitter at Chris Pinnock, and DM me if you need me. But yeah, just get in touch if you need something.
Fabulous. We could go on all day, but we're coming to the end here. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks working behind the scenes to keep the Tezos ecosystem humming along and keep Tezos at the forefront of the Web3 revolution. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or plug or talk about before we sign off here?
Well, just to say, I mean, to all our ecosystem participants, just please keep doing what you're doing, keep contributing. If you get stuck, if you need to talk to us, just shout. Come to us, come to me, talk to me on Slack, and we'll see what we can do. But please keep contributing and keep the good work up.
Fabulous. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on the TezTalks live stream. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Chris Pinnock, Head of Information Technology and Chief Baker at the Tezos Foundation. Now let's go earn some rewards.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.